Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment for the Sony a6100. Now, this 24 megapixel APS-C mirrorless offering is priced at $599 US. That is for the body alone. It doesn't include this lens. You can opt for the kit with the Pancake Power Zoom. It's really a matter of what you plan on doing with the camera, and I'm not going to dive too deep into what glass is appropriate, because for the most part this is a budget option at $600 US, which means you're probably going to want to stick to budget glass. So something like the kit lens or many of the other APS-C options that Sony has that do not break the bank, that are all classified as kit glass. So is the a6100 worth the money? Let's start off with that. In my opinion, it is absolutely worth it. I could argue that this is the best camera for the money on the market here in 2020, and arguably was in 2019 when it launched, because if you do not need every single feature, if you don't need the best available option, the a6100 is a fantastic one, even though it has some corners cut. So let's talk about what corners have been cut. I mentioned this in my first look at this camera. The body is polycarbonate, whereas if we look at something like, and these are all I have in the studio now, the a6500, we do not have polycarbonate, we have a carbon fiber build. The same applies to the a6300. So both of these cameras have more robust build quality, even though that they are older than the a6100. But let's keep in mind the a6100 has more modern internals. So besides the build quality, the build quality also equates to a lack of weather sealing. So if you're worried about shooting in inclement weather, this isn't the best option. But again, if you're a budget shooter, I don't think that's really your criteria necessarily. I'm not saying that if you're on a budget and have constraints associated with that, that you don't want to be able to shoot in any environment, but that's just something you need to be aware of with the 6100. The next thing is the EVF, and I mentioned, again, all of these things in my first look, and they pretty much panned out to be the only weak points, but I think it's very subjective. I don't think they're necessarily weak points for this camera. So the EVF is lower res than what you will find on other current models like the 6400 or the 6600. Now, do I think that's a big deal? No, because again, at a budget price, I think that it is competent and I can recommend it. Could it be better? Of course. In order for it to be better, you have to spend more money. That is the structure of Sony's pricing right now in the APS-C realm. The other thing you should know is that when it comes to shooting 4K video, which this does an exceptional job of doing, it does not have color profiles. So if you're looking for a DI tool that does have color profiles, you're going to have to, yet again, spend more money. But not that much more. It's just something you need to be aware of. But I don't really feel that the 6100 is targeting people that need that. So that's another thing that you have to take with a grain of salt and understand that this is the entry-level 6000 camera here in 2020 and was in 2019. So you can't expect to get all the things you would at a higher price point down at this price point, clearly. You do get the articulating screen, which is pretty much a hallmark now of all of Sony's current APS-C offerings. So that is definitely nice for vlogging and self-framing. You also have a smaller buffer. So even though this camera can shoot 11 frames per second and has fantastic autofocus that I would argue does outperform the a6300 as well as the 6500, you have to bear in mind that the number of shots you will be able to continuously shoot is not going to be as many as you can get with either, with the a6400 or the 6500 or 6600. But again, I feel like that's a given that I should not have to explain, because this is the budget option, and it's impressive to me that we're getting as much as we are with the 6100 considering its cost. Now, there is no in-body image stabilization, but there isn't any with the a6400 either. In order to get that, you have to step up to the 6600 or look at the older 6500. So where is that important? Well, if your lenses are not stabilized, that is important. It's good to have in-body image stabilization. Do I suggest you should go out and spend a lot more in order to get it? Will that be the difference in quality stills and video? No, it will not. Can it help? Absolutely. it again depends on which lenses you're going to shoot with. So for example, this piece of glass, which is very expensive and arguably the best APS-C rated piece of E-mount glass on the market, has no stabilization. It is not ideal for the 6100. Did I still get fantastic video and stills out of it? Absolutely. I mean, it's an f2.8 lens, the fastest piece of glass in a zoom model at least that exists in the APS-C world from Sony. So it really delivers. But if you want stabilized video, not an ideal pairing to have a body lacking in-body image stabilization and then a lens that has no optical steady shot. Whereas, something like this, the Pancake Zoom, which you could argue is trash compared to this. I think that's a fair assessment, and they cover the same range, 16 to 55 or 16 to 50 here, 16 to 55. You get what you pay for. There's nothing wrong with this lens, but there are much better lenses out there. But I think this is likely going to be the starting pairing that most of you will probably opt for. Of course, you can get a better entry-level kit lens than the Power Zoom, but the Power Zoom gives you a little more flexibility and definitely maintains the form factor. I would like to see Sony revamp this, but that's not what today's video is about. Beyond that, it's really about that autofocus system, as I mentioned, which these do not have. They have very similar hybrid contrast detection systems, but the a6100 pretty much has the same system you'll find in the 6400 and the 6600, which is very impressive. I already mentioned 11 frames per second real-time tracking, which is really the thing that sets it apart from both of these. So while I like the 6300 and I like the 6500, they show their age in that they do not have the real-time tracking, which is a game changer for all cameras, not just mirrorless APS-C. And if you've used it before, you already know for video, it is amazing. And it really has given Sony an edge in the entire DI world over everyone else. You can argue otherwise, you'll be talking to yourself. So what's wrong with the a6100? Nothing really. I mean, the things I've mentioned that have been omitted, like color profiles, the EVF resolution, the build quality, and not being weather sealed, these are all things that I don't want to say they're even corners that needed to be cut. It's the way they can deliver a budget camera. 4K video is uncapped, so you can record as much as you want. I did not run into overheating. So what is this perfect for? I mean, considering you don't have in-body stabilization and you'll need to get a lens with stabilization, if you're really looking to shoot video with this, I think a gimbal is ideal. I'm not going to get into which right now. I've covered many. I own many. But I think a lightweight gimbal is perfect for this setup if you're really worried about video stabilization and not looking to spend a fortune on lenses, because this isn't the only incredibly expensive lens. I mean, even if I talk about this f4 10 to 18, which is arguably my favorite APS-C lens because of its form factor and capability, you have steady shot here, but you're still going to need a gimbal. Now on the still side, you don't need one. Of course, stabilization is important. You'll gain some stops, but it isn't a game breaker. So in my opinion, the 6100, as I said at the top of the video, is easily, I think, a quick recommendation to anyone looking to get fantastic hybrid performance on a fixed budget. And as long as you understand that you're not going to get an a6400 or an a6600, I mean, we are still working with a W series battery, none in here right now. You're going to get over 300 shots, stills. Video side, if you do a mix, of course, your yields are going to go down, but that's not a big deal. I mean, again, you're getting fantastic still performance. I mean, the autofocus capability does exceed what either of these cameras can do, and many people will argue, not by that much. It's enough that I wouldn't recommend either of these. How about that? And while I do prefer to have in-body image stabilization, again, I've got to revert back to, if you're on a budget, that's not really how you determine what you're purchasing. We've all been there. I still am. I think many of you are. And as a result, you have to assess what you're getting for the money. And I think when you look at the entire package you're getting with the 6100, there's really nothing to dislike. The things that were omitted are additional features. Would they be nice to have? Sure. But I would be more concerned if they had taken real-time tracking out of this or something of that nature, because then this really would be a tremendous letdown in terms of solidifying a budget APS-C option that's lightweight and capable, because all of a sudden you would have performance that is very much similar to these two, and then I would be doing a comparison and recommending one of these instead, likely the 6500 and not the 6300, even though these share more DNA in terms of actually having no in-body stabilization. But the 6100 delivers, and it still has a flash, which was removed from the 6600 flagship, which is disappointing. Still has a microphone input, still has Sony's multi-port, which is micro USB and HDMI out. So it really is very versatile. The still performance was great. The 4K performance was pretty much what I get with other models that don't have in-body stabilization. So you're going to get the same performance you would from the 6400, which is a more expensive body, again, without the improved EVF, without the deeper buffer for stills, and of course without color profiles or weather sealing. And it sounds like a lot, but I have to say, for average users, hobbyists, enthusiasts, those are not game changers. I mean, color profiles are great if you're doing filmmaking. If you're not, they're kind of irrelevant. I mean, if you find yourself taking everything straight out of camera, this is moot. It really is. Furthermore, the buffer size I think is negligible. I don't think that's going to change anybody's mind. And the EVF, as I already said, is completely serviceable. I mean, it's nothing like the EVF on my A7R4, but my A7R4 is a $3,500 camera. This is a $600 camera, so let's get real. And my A7R4 still does not have an LCD that can flip all the way around. I wish that it did, but that just isn't available yet. I'm sure, or I'm not sure, I imagine that the next generation of full-frame cameras, or even possibly the A7S that's about to get announced hopefully soon, will maybe sport that, but they don't need to, because again, that market, the pro-grade market, while they would welcome it, it isn't necessary. They're not filming themselves, so that's not really an issue. And if they are, they use a field monitor. So the sum of the parts here is that this is a great budget camera. Pair some budget glass with it, and you're going to have a great photographic and video-centric tool that, of course, will outshine anything else at this price point, and surely will take a giant crap on your smartphone if that's what you've been leaning on. It is better than something like an RX100, other than the fact that an RX100 can, of course, fit in your pocket. This cannot. So the A6100, again, I can recommend without hesitation. I think if you pick it up now or as it goes on sale over time, you will not be disappointed. It has everything you need. The things it has omitted are really targeted at people that know they need them and are going to spend more money. So unlike the 6400 or the 6600, which I did like both of those cameras, the 6100, in my opinion, is the shining star because it is welcoming in everyone on a budget to the APS-C mirrorless bandwagon without really, in my opinion, cutting corners. And that is impressive. And if I myself was in the market for a budget option, the 6100 would be where it's at for me, because the things I just mentioned, again, if you don't need them or if you don't have the budget to accommodate them, they're easy to live without, in my opinion. The biggest one for me would be the in-body image stabilization, and even that, again, I can justify because of the very low price point on this camera. If things were a little bit closer, if it didn't have real-time tracking, the eye autofocus, all of those things, I'd be talking a lot more about these two cameras because they're still both great photographic tools. I still recommend them, but being that the 6100 eclipses both in the autofocus realm, I take them out of the picture for that reason alone, because that to me is more important than anything that was omitted from this body in order to give it its $600 US retail. That pretty much rounds things out. The touchscreen functionality I didn't get into today because I don't really use that. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's there. So that's another good thing. And I do not see this as a pathway to justify buying a 6400. You know, I mentioned it in my first look. A lot of reviewers say, oh, the 6100 is great, but you're better off spending more money and getting the 6400, or even taking the leap maybe up to the overpriced 6600, which isn't as overpriced as it used to be. I'm not in that camp at all. I think the 6100 is fantastic where it's at. You don't need to justify to people that they should spend more money. If their budget is where the 6100 is at, they're not going to be disappointed. If they have more money, then we can talk about looking at other cameras. But if that were the case, you wouldn't be watching this review, you'd be watching my 6400 or 6600 review, right? I mean, that is ultimately the tail of the tape, as they say. So I like the 6100. I don't think you have to spend more if you know it meets your needs. It may surpass most users' needs. I think it does, because countless of you out there comment and say, I don't even shoot 4K. I mean, I have for years, many of you have, but there are still people that are buying a still camera first and the video is a secondary feature. And if that's the case, you'll still do incredibly well with the 6100. You're just getting the bonus of having fantastic 4K footage at the helm as well, which I think is great. The real-time tracking really cannot be beat. And as I mentioned, the eye detection is just a cherry on top for both humans and animals alike. 6100, if I could give it a gold star, I don't do that here, it gets it, because I haven't seen a budget camera from Sony in a very long time that can do everything, pretty much, the important things at least, that the higher end models can do. And the 6100 delivers. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them, hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.